Hey everyone, namaste, and thank you all for taking the time to be here and to join me in this conversation with Dr. Kausthub Desikachar. So before I introduce Kausthub, as I wait for people to come in and please comment and let me know that you're here. So let me just say a few things about myself for those of you who don't really know me. So my name is Shailaja Menon, and I have been in the field of yoga for over 20 years now. The yoga practice has really shaped much of my life, and along the way, I became a Manasa yoga teacher. I became the author of a book, Yoga Shakti, and I also teach at my own studio called Mat and Beyond here in Malaysia. I just use all these different platforms to express my love for yoga. And I began these conversations during the lockdown, actually encouraged by Kaustubh. He was the one who actually told me, why don't you start doing something? And then, we kind of got together and started these conversations. And it's also because though yoga has become so hugely popular today and has spread worldwide, in fact, I always say from the caves of Himalayas, I think it's gone on to the interiors of Africa. But along the way, there's also been a lot of misinformation about the yoga practice. So these conversations are really a way to, bring about some authentic conversation about yoga, and especially to people who want to have a broader understanding of the practice beyond just, a class that they take once a week to stretch their bodies. So Kaustubh, as most of you know, is a renowned yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and author, continuing the classical yoga tradition of his grandfather, T. Krishnacharya, and his father, T.K.V. Desikachar. Kaustubh began studying yoga when he was only 9 years old under his father and began teaching by the time he was 13. He holds a dual master's degree from the renowned Birla Institute of Technology and Sciences and has a doctorate from the University of Madras. Kaustubh continues to conduct teacher training and therapist training programs around the globe, traveling 8 months of the year to Europe, China, Australia, and several other parts of the world. He has authored several books too, and to name a few, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, To Serve with Love, a tribute to T.K.V. Desikachar, The Yoga of the Yogi, The Legacy of T. Krishnacharya, and his objectives include the sharing of authentic teachings of yoga to the modern era and building bridges between different healing modalities to promote physical, emotional, social, and spiritual health. And towards this, he speaks on different platforms and addresses a wide audience. So I'm going to invite Kaustubh to begin this session with his beautiful chanting, and then we go on to the questions from there. So Kaustubh, please.
Namaste, everybody, and please let us know through your comments if you can hear me and Shailaja very well. We will begin with an invocation. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste, friends.
That was truly beautiful.
Thank you, Shailaja, for organizing this talk again. Let us see
Always,
what dangerous question.
It's always a pleasure to have these conversations with you, Kaustubh. So we begin with the title of today's talk. It was also the title of last week's. This is really a continuation of that, which is yoga tradition, right? So just want to go into that word tradition and, what is the significance of tradition in yoga?
There are some systems that you have to learn only through a tradition, among which yoga is one of them. In Vedic science, in Vedic philosophy, Vedic tradition, we have different kinds of learning, different kinds of shastras. Jijnasa Shastra, Anushasana Shastra, Vyakhyana Shastra, etc., of which yoga is an Anushasana Shastra. That's another symbolism why Patanjali begins with the first sutra, Atha Yoga Anushasana. He reminds everybody that yoga is an Anushasana, which means it has to follow a traditional system of learning where the teacher and the students sit close to each other and share their interactions, share their experiences, and that is how yoga has to be taught, especially because a system like yoga takes time to learn the intricacies, because the system of yoga grows with you. For example, when you take my own case, I studied with my father for more than 25 plus years because I started when I was very young, and it lasted till my father's passing. And there are many subjects like the Yoga Sutra, for example, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, for example, the Asana techniques, for example, the Pranayama techniques, for example, that I studied multiple times, because what we learn once will open one door and that will stay with us for a while. And then the next time we hear it, it goes, even the same thing goes a little bit more deeper, because another layer will be taught. And that is the beauty of tradition. Traditional knowledge hands down secrets from one generation to the other over a long time. So the intricacy, the subtle teachings of yoga come only through this traditional knowledge, because the student and teacher have to grow and evolve. And I also remember that even my own father was evolving as he was growing, because when I was starting to study yoga when I was in my teenagers, my father was at a particular age and a particular life experience. But when I started to teach yoga and come towards the end of my studies with yoga, my father was at a much different age, at a much different life experience. And therefore, he also taught slightly differently, because each time he taught, he changed. Because he had practiced, he had learned, and even he would understand the same teaching somehow slightly differently. So that's why tradition is very important, because it's through this conduit of teacher-student relationship that so many of the things fall into place.
I
Even
like
now,
that
my father is,
conduit.
even now, I truly believe, even now when my father is not alive, it's 4 years now since he's not alive, I still learn so much from him by revisiting the notes. And sometimes in my dreams, he is visiting to share certain things. I have these visions in the dreams. So it's because there is a connection through tradition, not for short time, over a long period of time. And there is parts of the teacher in the student. There's parts of my father in me, and there's parts of my grandfather in my father, and the line goes on. So many times these things open up. This is not possible to understand through materialistic science, but I witnessed it myself in my own experience, as well as in the experiences of my father and many other teachers who follow a sampradaya tradition, that there is no other way to learn yoga than tradition. If we are dipping our fingers in many, many traditions, we are not going to really dig deep in the same well. That's why Patanjali also says, Ekatattva Pyasaha. Choose one lineage, one path, and stay with it for a long time. But that path should have a lineage. The problem in modern yoga is many teachers do not have a tradition. When they say a tradition, sometimes they talk about one teacher or two teachers. I am very fortunate that we belong to a tradition that goes back continuously all the way till Nathamuni for about 1200 years. And before that, we don't know exactly the details, but it goes all the way back to Nammalvar, who lived about 3,500 years ago. So, almost a contemporary of Patanjali. So, it's so fascinating that that is the tradition we belong to, and I'm so honored to be part of this tradition. And without tradition, yoga will not make sense.
That was really beautiful, Kaustubh, especially that bit about the teacher-student relationship being the conduit through which the universe flows the information down. So, but I just want to say you're very blessed to have been in this tradition, and me included, right? I didn't come from any yoga kind of background, so not everybody is so blessed to have this big lineage and tradition. So, yeah, I guess we try to stay with one and we work through it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And just saying hello to so many people who have come in. So I see Supriya, Eril, Kasturi, a lot of your friends also. There's VG, good friend of mine, Girish, Radha Auntie is there. Hey, hi Auntie. There's Mini, of course, my good friend. There's Uma, a lot of students. I think most of your students here as well. Kimberly, I think, is your student. So just hi to everybody and thank you for tuning in. Please, feel free to interact with us, make this conversation come alive. Just write your questions down in the comment section, and we really look forward to addressing them and staying in touch with you. Yeah. So we go into the second question. I mean, this is really to go back to the purpose of yoga, like with International Yoga Day coming up in a few days. It's really important to get back to the roots, and the title of this talk is also that. So, what was the purpose of yoga to the original yogis? I mean, now I know to a lot of people it's about strengthening their back or stretching their hamstrings, but to the original yogis, what was the purpose?
Well, there's two views. One is very simple. The view of Patanjali is reduction of suffering of any kind and finding liberation. So basically, it's because we are suffering, we are not liberated. Or the opposite, because we are not liberated, we are suffering. So this is also something that is kind of like the chicken and the egg. One contributes to the other. So from Patanjali's point of view, yoga is for reduction of dukkham and therefore slowly liberate us from the cycle of birth and rebirth on one hand. The main dukkham we have is non-fulfillment of our dharma. Because remember, in the old days, people were not suffering because they did not have the latest phone or the latest car. They were not so trivial. We have become trivial. In the old days, the people they were suffering mainly because they were not fulfilling their dharma. Anyway, that's one side. On the other side, there's another theory that there are three purposes for yoga: Laukika, Vaidika, and Chikitsa. Laukika means what we are searching for today as well. We want to improve our quality of life. We want to improve our quality of life. And this is something that was the need for people even 2,500, 3,000 years ago. They were also looking for better quality of life. Now, what improved their quality of life, what improved our quality of life, that may have changed. But the fact that we are looking for a better quality of life, that is not changed. And that is something that is been there for a long time. That is what is called Laukika Vyavahara. The purpose of improving daily interactions, like how we can have a better relationship with family, with neighbors, how we can perform better our dharma, etc. Vaidika, the spiritual purpose is to realize our dharma and fulfill that dharma. That is called Vaidika Artha. Yoga is a tool to help us to fulfill. Each one of us is there for a particular purpose, and we need to evolve into that purpose and express that purpose. That is called Vaidika. That's what is spirituality according to yoga. The final thing is there is an obstacle for both the Laukika and the Vaidika, which is disease or ill health. So, yoga was also in those days a form of therapy because they don't have medical facilities like we have. In those days, yoga was a therapy, Ayurveda was a therapy, Siddha was a therapy. They used natural systems for health and well being because they were not always having the medical facilities like we have. Even a doctor, an Ayurvedic doctor in the old days, was not always available in the same village. So they would not call the doctor or visit the doctor just because they have a mild headache, mild neck pain, ulcer, or small things like that. For that, they had their own system of healing from yoga and Ayurveda. They already had that knowledge. Only for serious illnesses, they would either go to the doctor or invite the doctor to their village to take care of the patient. So, this is why yoga was also a therapeutic approach. And some people think that yoga and yoga therapy are two different things. I disagree because if we say that yoga is for reduction of suffering, that is a therapy. So, yoga's purpose is a therapy first and foremost because therapy is not just removal of physical problems, emotional suffering also is a suffering, and that is why yoga has an important place there as well. So, these were the original purposes of yoga. As
Yeah,
I
that's a really
mentioned,
great insight and perspective that yoga is first and foremost a therapy.
as I answer these, I see some very fascinating comments, especially from Claire.
I was
Yes,
just going to read that. So she says, I feel honored to have seen you evolve as a teacher to Kaustubh, and so exciting and wonderful to benefit from your insights. So thank you, sir.
yes. I think Claire and I, we know each other for a long time. I think it was 1997, 98, or 99, where the first time we met. It's a long time. I've doubled my age since.
There's also, I think these are all your students, Kaustubh, Tanvi, Lucia, Kimberly, Carol Chan. So we go to the next question, and we start off with Sage Kapila. Yeah, so Sage Kapila is an important name in yoga practice. So who was Sage Kapila, and what has been his role in the evolution of yoga?
I really love this name Kapila because of two reasons. First is what we are going to discuss now in the context of yoga. But I have to mention the other thing also, which is that it's the name given to the Indian captain who first got us the World Cup cricket,
Kapil
Kapil.
Dev.
So I'm always very happy to hear this name because he is somebody who made Indians proud in 1983 when
Okay,
he
so
won the
you're,
World Cup.
you're a cricket fan.
No, no, I'm not a cricket fan. I'm a cricket fanatic.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah. So Kapila is a great Maharishi who gave the Sankhya philosophy through the Sankhya Sutra. And Sankhya is perhaps the most important contribution to the world of Vedic philosophy because without Sankhya, we will not have the school of yoga, nor Vedanta, nor Ayurveda. So Kapila is so important, and that's why in the Bhagavad Gita, even Krishna says, among the rishis, I am Kapila, because Kapila is so important. There are so many rishis like Vishwamitra, Vasishtha, Vyasa, etc. Patanjali himself is a Maharishi, but Krishna says, among the rishis, I am Kapila, because Kapila is the most important in the terms of the contribution because it's only through the Sankhya philosophy that further philosophies like
Evolved.
yoga and Vedanta and others evolved. And therefore, I always consider this as the greatest duty of every yoga teacher, at least for if not students, every yoga teacher to have a reasonable understanding of the Sankhya philosophy because there are many aspects of Sankhya that are existing in yoga philosophy. In fact, yoga has an alternate name. Yoga is called Seshwara Sankhya, which means Sankhya with Ishvara, because Sankhya does not talk about Ishvara. Patanjali talks about Ishvara. So Patanjali has added Ishvara to Sankhya and made the philosophy a little bit more exciting, a little bit different than Sankhya. There are some differences between yoga and Sankhya, but Sankhya is a very, very important basis for yoga philosophy. So every teacher of yoga must study Sankhya, at least know the important tenets of Sankhya philosophy, because that is the basis for yoga as well as Ayurveda. Because it talks about how the human body evolves, how Purusha and Prakriti come together, and how why they come together to fulfill a dharma. And this is why Sankhya is very important, and that is why we need to honor Kapila, who is considered the Sutrakara of Sankhya philosophy.
Thank you. That was really informative and very nice. About I like that bit about. I heard you talk this earlier in one of your Zoom as well. That why did we evolve, right? And why did we evolve? And you said that it was to fulfill our dharma. So that dharma concept is so important even there.
Yes, it's something that we cannot remove. See, we are not just born to eat and procreate. We are here for a mission, for a dharma. The dharma may be different for each of us, but we are here for a purpose. That purpose we have to fulfill.
So just saying hi, I see Suma there. First time I'm seeing you here, Suma. Nice to see you. And going back to the questions, what has been the influence of other religions and philosophies on yoga? Like when you talk about yoga, there's always talk about Buddhism, Jainism, all of that comes up. So just can you just talk a little bit about that?
It's it's a very interesting question because yoga, I feel yoga in some way precedes Buddhism and Jainism. Uh, and there are some fundamental differences. And let's talk more about the differences between the yoga and Buddhism, because there are it is in much more practice than yoga and than Jainism, even though there are a lot of Jains in India. There are some things that are common between yoga and Buddhism, which is that Buddhism also talks about the four attitudes that Patanjali talks about: Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, as the four noble truths. So, this is something that is common between the yoga and the Buddhism. And there's also a commonality between what is called the Eightfold Path. Both yoga and Buddhism, they talk about the Eightfold Path. Patanjali talks about the Eightfold Path in the second chapter called Ashtanga Yoga. And in Buddhism also there is the Eightfold Path. However, I feel that the similarities end there. And if somebody is not doing further research, they may be tempted to think that yoga and Buddhism are kind of the same and they share similar kind of concepts. It's actually quite different. There are some very fundamental differences that we have to understand. First and foremost, yoga is an astika darshana. Now, Buddhism is not an Astika Darshana. Astika Darshana means that those philosophies that accept the concept of the self, the Purusha, as a reality that is relatively permanent compared to the body. It's relatively permanent. Compared to Ishvara, it's not. But compared to human body and mind, Purusha is relatively more permanent. That is called Nitya Tattva. Whereas Buddhism does not acknowledge the concept of the self. Buddhism gives the concept more to the mind. Buddhism gives much more importance to the mind, and therefore it's a very fundamental difference, because in yoga the focus is on the self, in Buddhism the focus is on the mind. And the Buddhist view is that the self is a fiction of the mind. That's why Buddhist school is called Chitta Tantra, because it is similar to the Vainashaka school, that is from where Buddha takes some ideas. And Vainashaka is a school that existed in the time of Patanjali, which Patanjali refutes. In the Nacha Eka Chitta Tantram Chet Tad Apramanakam Tadakim Syat. So he talks about the concept of Chitta Tantra that is borrowed by Buddhism from the Vainashaka school, which is saying that self is a creation of the mind. In yoga school, self is not a creation of the mind, self is a reality. The second difference is that Ishvara is a crucial concept in yoga. But Buddhism does not recognize any principle that is divine beyond space or time. Buddhism talks about what is called Shunyata, sometimes what is called Dharmakaya, the body of Dharma. But they don't talk about Ishvara as Patanjali is expressing. The concept of divine is not existing. That's why Buddhism does not have the gods that Ishvara has, the yoga has, the Vedanta has. It does not have this. It's a very fundamental difference. Thirdly, the Buddhists are belonging to what is called Kshanikavada, whereas yoga belongs to what is called Sattvada. Kshanikavada is the theory of momentary reality. Now I am with you, you are real. I'm not with you, you are no more real. It's called Kshanikavada. Everything is a conception, a momentary conception of the mind. Patanjali's view is the opposite. He belongs to the school called Sattvada. So Patanjali also, there are schools in the past that existed with the Kshanikavada. Vainashaka is one of them. There are similarities between Vainashaka and Buddhism as well. And Patanjali refutes that. Chittantara drishye buddhi buddhehe ati prasangaha smriti sankarascha. If everything is a momentary reality, there will be great confusion. There will be very, very great confusion between the two. So he refutes that. So that's another difference between the Buddhist and the yoga school. The fourth point of difference is that there is a practical difference, that yoga believes that we have to have an object of focus for meditation, for dhyanam. Deshabandhaha chittasya dharana, where desha is the first word. You need to have a focus for meditation, whether it's dharana, dhyanam or samadhi. Nirguna is not suggested by yoga, whereas in Buddhism, Nirguna is a very important focus of meditation. Shunyata is a very important formless meditation, and this is what so many Buddhists are practicing. So it's a difference of approach. Now, please remember, I'm talking about the divergences or differences. I'm not saying which one is better, which one is not better.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of India. That's the beauty of Vedic culture, where we don't have this attitude that if you are not in my way, you are the highway. If you are not with me or against me, we don't have that. Vedic culture appreciates diversity. That's why we have all these different traditions together. And this is a very, very critical concept. That is the difference in terms of the practice of meditation. In another difference is that the mind and the self constitute an area of difference. Buddhism defines reality in terms of the mind and often refers to that as the ultimate truth, one mind they call it. Whereas in yoga, the mind is got a lower position compared to Purusha. Purusha is the superior, the master. Tat prabho purushasya aparinamitvat. Mind is not the master, Purusha is the master. So that's another difference on how they view the mind. Another key difference is on the school of karma. Both agree that karma is the main causality factor behind rebirth in the world. However, in Buddhism, karma is a self existent principle, and the world exists because of some beginningless karma. However, in yoga, karma is not self existence, it is a merely somehow an attachment, inertia that we are, that is inherited from the past, and somehow it is connected with Ishvara as well, which Buddhism denies because in Buddhism there is not that Ishvara. So how karma is interpreted is also difference between the two schools. And yet another major difference is on the concept of liberation. What is liberation? So both Buddhism and yoga view liberation as the ultimate goal. In Buddhism, they call it nirvana, where they say that nirvana is the merging into the shunya. This is how it is done, and it is usually done through the reduction of what they call the three poisons, the three vishas, the poisons, which is raga, dvesha, and moha. Whereas in yoga, liberation is described as Purusha establishing itself in its true nature, fulfilling its dharma. So that's a quite a different way of interpreting liberation. So there are differences like that which separate the two schools. And many people in the modern era, they don't know all these details. So somehow they kind of mix. And that's why we get a kind of confused, blended version of the two. And that is why it's creating a lot of problems. But both systems can exist independently. And in fact, even people can practice both systems as long as they're clear about it. And of course, there are differences between Buddhism and Jainism and Buddhism and Hinduism, etc., which are also other aspects, but I'm sure there's not so much time to discuss this. But since you mentioned Buddhism, I stuck to that as the main area of differences.
It was really very, very well explained, Kaustubh, extremely informative. And I'm sure everybody's going to listen to this recording a few times to really come to terms with all this. And it's very nicely how you talked about the similarities and also what makes it different. And like you say, I think certain terms are kind of common, like there's meditation, both yoga talks about meditation, Buddhism's main tool is meditation. So that leaves room for a lot of confusion. And like you say, you get a mishmash of both. And people need to know what is what.
The problem is many of the terms, they are technical terms which you have to interpret in that context of that system. Same words may mean differently in different contexts. If you are talking about separation in a legal context, it may refer to a separation between a husband and wife in a marriage. But if you're talking about separation in terms in a chemistry lab, it may be that you are separating two different chemicals. The same word separation is a technical term in certain subjects. The same way, things like dhyanam is a technical term in yoga has one meaning, in Buddhism has another meaning. The same, avidya has one word, one meaning in Sankhya and yoga, has another meaning in Vedanta philosophy. Because each one is technical. The concept of liberation is a technical term, one meaning in yoga, one meaning in Buddhism, one meaning in Vedanta philosophy. So you cannot this and put it there. That approach will not work. That's why we have all this confusion.
But I think this is really, I mean, this is also Hinduism's greatness. And I think I've said this before, but it's also what causes a lot of confusion in people because we're so used to, like, if you have one religion, you have one book, but here you have so many different philosophies, so many great teachers, each of them seem true when you read it. And we really don't have an exposure to all this, as we grow up. So we just get really confused, what is Vedanta, what is Tantra, what is Advaita Vedanta, Samkhya. So we don't have the knowledge about all this, and it just seems so confusing. But as you go along the way, you realize that there are all these different philosophies, and each one has to be seen in its context.
I have to disagree with you because this is only the confusion for part of the population. That part which is now heavily influenced by Western science. Because Western science has been hijacked by the view of the Abrahamical religions like Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, which all are monotheistic, where they have a kind of a view saying, if you're not with us, you're against us. And that view has penetrated the way of modern science, where modern science says, well, if it's not proved by modern science, it's wrong. That's very dangerous. That's fanatical. There are a lot of people, especially in Asia still, who are not governed by this way of thinking. That they don't actually have confusion because they're used to different ways of thinking. I teach in Asian countries like in China, in Japan, in Malaysia, in Singapore, and all that, where there is the view that you can coexist with different views. It's not a problem. So there is not so much confusion there. Whereas if you take the view that there's one reality, everything else is wrong, then you have a problem. Then you have a real problem. And that's the beauty of classical traditional cultures which are not influenced by this monotheistic view. And this is existing in also cultures like the Maori culture, the Aboriginal culture, the pagan cultures, where they worship different kinds of entities in nature, because there's not one way only. There's not one way only. The more we step back from this, what do you call it? Monocular, I don't know if there's a word, binocular, I know it's a word, but monocular view, the better it is for us. Because there's not just one way, there should be many ways. I hope some traditional English speakers like Kim or Claire can clarify if monocular is a word or I just made it up.
Well, basically, I think we really have to have that broad perspective.
Yes.
And not have this totally single narrow perspective to anything.
There's not only one reality or one view in this world. We have to learn to respect it.
True. Okay, so just moving on from here, this is again, I was doing some research on the history of yoga, and I saw this this article by Mark Singleton, who is actually an author of a book, Yoga Body Origins of Modern Posture Practice. And he seems to suggest that the yoga asanas that we practice today are really from a gymnastic tradition practiced in Scandinavian countries and somehow found its way to India. So just wondering if you could share some light.
I think this view is highly biased and it's kind of not correct. And it only shows the ignorance of such an author. And we must ignore that because this is not at all a reality. When you look at the first commentary of the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, that is written by Vyasa, that is about 2000 years old. I don't think at this time Scandinavian gymnastics even existed. In that time, Vyasa, in the commentary to the Sutra on Asana, already talks about many of these complicated asanas that we practice in modern yoga as well. So it's very, very, how to say, false what such kind of person is propagating, because I think he is wanting to somehow get popular through producing something that is sensational rather than based on reality. He's trying to create a narrative rather than establishing a fact. It's just a ridiculous proposition, and I think he's not very well informed. And I pray that he will actually do some proper research and understand yoga better, so that he can present reality. But I doubt it, because I think these kind of authors are more interested in selling more number of books. And unfortunately, in the business of selling books, you don't need to present reality to sell more books. You can sell more books by selling fantasies, and that is what these kind of authors are doing.
So I think what he was trying to say was also that the earlier scriptures of yoga didn't really talk much about asana, and that was his basis. That the modern posture practice, the focus on postures that we do, is really something that has evolved quite recently, and like I say, from other countries as well.
I
Anyway,
mean, if he's stating that even is showing greater ignorance from his side, because texts like the Yoga Yajnavalkya Samhita that are so old, because Yajnavalkya is a Vedic rishi. He is talking about different asanas and giving techniques of asanas, etc., in one of the chapters of his text in great detail. That's the problem. He's not done his research properly. There are a number of classical yoga texts that talks about all these kind of asanas. The problem is, in the traditional time, asanas were not physical postures at all. Asanas were positions for mantra, positions for dhyanam, positions for pranayama, etc. So they are not interested in using the body like a physical fitness regime. That's why many of these people don't get it. Because for us, yoga, even yogasana, is not a physical practice, it's a spiritual practice. And as long as you maintain the view that yoga is a physical practice, you will not be encouraged to research deeper, because you don't want the truth to destroy your illusion that yoga is a physical practice. And that is why these kind of authors will not do further research, because they don't want to know the truth. They just want to propagate their belief. In that way, they are very dangerous, because there is fanatical. They're not establishing themselves in the truth.
yeah, so I just thought this was a good opportunity to clear that with you. And just going over, so Kimberly here says that monocular is an English word for one eye, so you're safe there, Kausthub.
So monocular is an English word. Great. Oh, my English teacher Sarah has just joined in. So
Yeah.
namaste, Sarah.
And then I have a question from Chandran. So he says, could you please comment on the commonalities and divergences between yoga and Sanatana Dharma?
How much time you have?
We have only about 17 minutes.
Yoga is part of the Sanatana Dharma. So yoga is aligning itself with Sanatana Dharma. So I don't really see that there is some kind of divergence in this point of view. Now, yoga is one of the 6 schools that forms part of the Sanatana Dharma. So yoga is very well aligned with the Sanatana Dharma. There is not any deviation. Like I said, they are all part of the Vaidika Astikya Darshanas, which all together form the Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma is not only one discipline, it's a collection of view that has been practiced in India for a long time.
And Rajeshwari has asked, is it possible to learn yoga with Vedas?
Is it possible to learn yoga with?
I guess knowledge of the Vedas.
Vedas talk about the yoga definitely, because there are many Upanishads that talk about the yoga. However, like I said earlier in the beginning of this interview, yoga is an Anushasana Shastram. And the word comes from Shasu Anushishta. We need to learn that from a teacher. Yoga is one of those things that has to be learned through the grace of the teacher, through the personal interaction with the teacher. This is one of the challenges of modern era. We don't have that many great teachers, nor do we have the interest to learn with some teachers because we want to do teacher shopping, go from one teacher to the other, and that is partially the problem. But yes, you can. Yoga is a Vedic darshana, so there is no problem. There will be no contradiction between yoga and the Vedic knowledge that comes from the Vedas.
Okay, so I guess that addressed that question. So just going on to another one. In the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they don't talk about nadis, chakras, bindus, etc. And all that is actually mentioned in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So just wondering why is that and how do we place these great scriptures, right?
Now, again, I have to say that this is also not a correct view because Patanjali is talking about nadis and chakras in a very passing way. Nabhi chakre kaya vyuha jnanam kurma nadyam stairyam. So Patanjali is talking about this concept, but in a very brief way, because the sutra style of text in the past is a very brief way. It's an aphorism kind of way. And like I said, it has to be studied under the guidance of a teacher. So for the sutra, for example, Nabhi Chakre Kaya Vyuha Jnanam, that sutra, when you study, you have to understand the human body through the form of the nadis and the chakras, because that is basically what Patanjali is telling us here. In my grandfather's commentary on the Yoga Valley, there are pages and pages written on this sutra, Nabhi Chakre Kaya Vyuha Jnanam. Talks about the division of the body called the Urdhvakaya, Adhokaya, Mahasrotas, Mahanimnam, etc. All these in relationship with this sutra, Nabhi Chakre Kaya Vyuha Jnanam. Nabhi Chakra refers to the Manipuraka Chakra. That's where we all evolve from, because that is the connection to the mother. At the time of conception, all the 7 chakras were in the Nabhi Mandala. From there is a separation of space, and then they form other chakras which form our human system. So Patanjali is talking about chakras. Patanjali is talking about nadis, kurma nadyam stairyam. Patanjali talks about the kurma nadi, that is the nadi in this region. When he talks about the nadi in this region, we have to understand, okay, what about other nadis in other regions? That knowledge will be given by the teacher in private, not from the book. See, that's one problem, because the texts in the traditional time were not manuals, because they did not ever write down and carry a manual everywhere they went. When you buy a phone now or a car now, you have a manual. This is not what the yoga scriptures or any Vedic scripture was. It was not a manual. It was directional. It was like like giving you some direction that you will have to reflect on and understand further with the help of the teacher. That's why some of the phrases in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, they are not even complete sentences.
True.
They are just directional words. They are not full sentences. So we have to complete those sentences with the help of the teacher. Baleshu hasti baladini. If you literally translate the word baleshu, through the strength, hasti baladini, the strength of elephant and etc. It makes no sense if you just take these words. They are not a manual. They're directional. That to go ask the teacher, what does it mean? The teacher will say, this sutra has to be interpreted as Baleshu, Hasti Baleshu Samyamat, Hasti Baladini. The gaps have to be filled with the help of the teacher. So that's why you don't find all these details, because please remember, all of our Vedic teachings were orally transmitted. So not everything was written down. So you can't say, oh, it's not found. You can't say it's not found. We have to find this out through our interaction with our teacher.
So, what is the Samkhya? They don't talk about God, right?
Sankhya is not mentioning the concept of Ishvara, yes.
But in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he brings in Ishvara. So, what is the place of Ishvara in yoga?
I have a view that is very aligned with Patanjali's view, which is without Ishvara, if you remove Ishvara from yoga, you are not in yoga, you go back to Sankhya. So if you want to stay in yoga philosophy, Ishvara is a must. Now, Patanjali is very generous. He presents Ishvara in different ways in the first chapter and in the second chapter. In the first chapter, he presents Ishvara as somehow as a choice, because the first chapter is meant for people with already a reasonable state of mind, and Ishvara helps us to reach Samadhi easier. It's one of the ways, because they're very near. In the second chapter, no way it's a choice. And second chapter is for people with a disturbed mind, that is most of us in the modern era. Patanjali never uses the word that it's a choice. If you want to engage in Ishvara, Patanjali does not give this for the second chapter. So, Ishvara is a very important concept in yoga. And Patanjali even says in the second chapter, Samadhi Siddhi Ishvara Pranidhanat. And when you interpret that in the correct manner, it says, if you really want to achieve mastery in Samadhi, you need to have an acceptance and surrender to Ishvara. How you do that, which Ishvara you should worship, that is your choice. Somebody may want Jesus, somebody may want Allah, somebody may want Narayana. That's okay. But you cannot remove Ishvara from yoga. This is not possible. To go back to Sankhya.
Okay, thank you. And the popular perception, like everywhere, yoga is, the word Sanskrit used to unite yoga, the Jivatma to Paramatma union, right? That's how we understand yoga. But they say that in Sankhya philosophy, it talks about separation as the state that brings about freedom from suffering. So is yoga about union or separation?
Both. Dukkha samyoga viyogaha yogaha. One of the definitions given by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita for yoga is what is called Dukkha samyoga viyogaha yogaha. We are so attached to our suffering. It's almost like we are wearing the suffering as our robe. So, separation from the dukkha is yoga. Now, if you have to separate from dukkha, where should you have connection to? You have to have a connection to something else that is of a higher nature. Maybe your dharma, maybe the Ishvara. But there has to be a connection for separating yourself from dukkha. Otherwise, you are connected to dukkha. So, yoga is a way where you are separating yourself from the dukkham and going towards something that is non-suffering. The non-suffering is only two things, either dharma or Ishvara, nothing else. Nothing else is non-suffering. Even joyfulness, like a cricket match. India wins. Now India wins today, I am attached to it. It doesn't mean that India will win tomorrow. So if I'm attached to that, I will suffer. Even attachment to joy is going to create suffering, because the joy is not guaranteed each time. So that's why attachment to something that is of a higher nature, like our dharma or the Ishvara, that will help us to separate from dukkham. So yoga is a separation from dukkham and a connection to a higher purpose.
Okay, thank you. So, with International Yoga Day coming up in 2 days, so some last words from you on, what you would, where you see the future of yoga and what you would like to see.
You are scaring me by saying last words.
I mean, for this session.
Oh, what? I don't want to advise anybody about what they should do or what they should not do, because I don't consider myself as a global teacher who is capable enough to give advice to everybody. But there is just two things I want everybody to reflect on, and I reflect on myself. For me, there's nothing called yoga day, because there's no day for me without yoga. So for me, every day is a yoga day. However, what I want to share is that I think we are in a very delicate moment in our history where there can be two paths we can establish. One path is this modern yoga, blah blah, where people are abusing the word yoga to just promote anything as yoga, whether it's dog yoga, bear yoga, cat yoga. This is what I call as this modern day yoga. And if you look at it, many of the Western yoga associations are promoting this because they get more money from their members, and they limit the yoga to only physical things like asana, as done as an exercise, not even done as an asana. So that's one choice that we have. The other choice is that we can actually soak in the nectar of true traditional yoga. And I would like to ask people to reflect on what choices they would like to make. Something that is momentary and fake, or something that is much more everlasting. And that choice they have to make in their heart, because they have to decide what is it that is going to nourish them. The moment they make that choice, that's going to define who they are and what path will unfold in front of them. That's what I would like to say to people. But I don't consider myself as a global teacher to advise everybody to do something. That's not my way.
So ultimately, you make the choice.
Yes, yoga is self empowerment. If you don't make your choice, nobody else can make that choice for you.
What direction we want our yoga practice to go.
Exactly. And we can't prevent that other direction, because people will do whatever they want anyway.
To happen.
So each individual, we have to choose what we need to do, what we think will nourish us. Do we want to get nourished by something like honey that is so rich, that flows slowly, that takes time to make? Or do we want some kind of watered down version, which is like a Coca Cola, that promises a momentary pleasure in the tongue, but it consumes our system eventually? That is what we have to choose. What we choose is going to define who we are.
Very nice. Nicely said. So I don't see any more questions here. So maybe we can wind up the session. If
Yeah,
anybody has any questions, just now is the time to put it there. There's Erica who says she learned so much. I think she was part of your yoga Sutra classes online during my time.
I
And
know.
which
Erica is my Swiss grandmother. We know each other for a long time, and I'm so grateful she's here, because I'm not allowed to tell her age, but she is my grandmother, so you can imagine.
so I mean, glad you're here too, Erica. So maybe we can wind up the session with chant, Kaustubh, exactly at 1 hour.
Om Shanno मित्रशं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वामेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्माम् अवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Namaste.
Namaste. That was really beautiful, Kaustubh. Before we just log off, do you want to invite people to your session? You're having a Zoom session, right, on International Yoga Day?
Yes. So on 21st, Sunday, is supposed to be the International Day of Yoga, but actually it's also the day of my father's birthday. And so we are having a very nice global prayer organized on this day, which is going to happen at 11 a.m. India time, which I think in Malaysia time is 1:30. So please join it because we're going to honor him with some chanting. But also we have a very surprising thing that we are going to share on that day. So please, you will be surprised with a surprise. Namaste. Please come.
Yeah, so I guess the details of that maybe come to on his Facebook.
Yeah, we will put it on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as we wind up the session, I just really hope that you broaden our understanding and perspective of yoga and life.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here, for your comments, for your comments. Also share your age here, so if you are interested, can check it out. But I mean, it is wonderful to have you all here and with more enthusiasm that keeps these conversations going. Thank you all. Thank you, Kaustubh.
Namaste.